Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And well, to start out with, I do want to quickly cover the latest video that, whoops, what the hell is all this updating stuff? So the latest video that, well, got quite a few reactions and not exactly in the direction that I expected. Well, on the one hand, it's really cool to see the passion that people show here when they say absolutely no on a reset for EVE Online. They are definitely worried about their efforts and everything that they've achieved in the game being wiped out, and I actually agree with that. I think it would be a very bad idea to try something like an EVE 2, to try something like a fresh server. However, this also shows that while a lot of people are super passionate about the game once they're in the game, it also shows that people in general don't get much further than the title of a video, because of course my suggestion was exactly the opposite. It was a way to incorporate potentially a reset hype for new players without wiping any of your achievements away from the game. And so only a couple of people out of like the 200 reactions that I saw there actually seem to go as far as to look at the actual idea and to comment on that part. So very interesting, and I definitely need to learn a lesson out of that, is to front load the actual idea. I think in my videos when I make discussion videos, rather than start out with the introduction as to why I want to talk about a certain topic. So really interesting stuff though, and I'm really impressed with the passion that people have when they even have to think about the possibility of losing XP or wealth or even experiences that they've had in the game. It would be a major blow to the player base, and I agree that it would not be a good thing or a good idea for EVE Online. Probably at any point. So EVE Forever does seem to have a really strong support in EVE Online. When it comes to news, development news, well, take a look at CC. There is a lot of new stuff there. Triglavian invasions, Tech 2 Triglavian ships. All of that is of course still work in progress, but you can start to take a look at that on the test server. Redesign for the agency as well. And I also quickly want to mention this one. Next week on Tuesday, 1700 server time, there will be another mass test for the 64-bit client CCPs, hoping to get a lot of people together. So I definitely want to encourage all of you guys, if you have the time, please show up. It takes about an hour, and the more people show up there, the more CCP can take a look at a stressed out client and a stressed out server when it comes to that new 64-bit architecture. So I will do everything in my power to be there, and I hope that I can see a lot of you guys there as well. But it shows that CCP is working hard on stuff in EVE Online. That new Triglavian invasion, well, lots of people are saying that's like another form of an incursion. We don't exactly know what to expect there, but from the first bits of information that I've seen so far, that does seem to be the case. So it does look like we'll have some time that we'll need to spend on a CC as well. Next up, we will take a quick look at the New Eden store, see what's happening here, and I'm seeing one sale here for the Caracal Negovi skin. Alright, not exactly my favorite skin with the camo pattern, but there is a sale and it's going for 16 Plex instead of 110. Well, if you don't have it and you like to collect skins, that's definitely an option. Other than that, we're not seeing anything too special. You may notice here that I'm down to 7,500 Plex. That does mean that yeah, I turned some more of those into ISK. I should always say. Let's move on then to the market itself, and we are of course going to start with Plex. That's gonna be at 420. Like that, and let's take a look at it. Turns out I sold a little bit too early again. I sold for 4.4 million ISK, and here is the price chart. Well, the 5-day moving average isn't there just yet, but you can see that the daily averages are getting to that 4.4 million mark, and we are again very close to the 1-year high point. Will we reach 4.5 million on the average? It's going to be tricky for the market to do, but we're still seeing even increased volumes as well. I think there is something that I didn't mention in the intro, the 16-year anniversary for EVE Online. A big reason to come back and log into the game, because every single day that you do so for, I think it's close to 2 weeks, you get free extra gifts from CCP. I already got, I think, a pretty cool looking Gnosis skin amongst those, and like a booster that can give you extra rep for the activities that you're doing. Not something I need personally, but it can definitely be pretty helpful for some players, and maybe that increased activity is bringing back some people to take a look at the game, and they're saying perhaps I should invest in some Plex to go Omega so that I can grab all the gifts rather than just the alpha gifts. And so we're getting a little spike, a second move to a 1-year high point. Currently in Jita we are selling Plex for almost 4.6 million ISK. Buyers are coming in at 4,360,000, and if I take a look at the trade hubs, they're still going for a bit above 4.4 million there, so that's where I try to sell for just below 4.4 million myself, and the buyers only go up to just shy of 4.4 million as well. But lots of upwards pressure, I think, and I think that the anniversary gifts are bringing back more players, and that it is increasing the volumes here, potentially continuing to increase the price. Something that I had not thought about myself, but definitely something that I should have thought about, that the anniversary of EVE Online is of course a period where we might see some volatility in Plex prices, and here I think that it's actually upwards pressure that we're seeing from that. Next up we have the multiple pilot train certificate, staying just shy of 2 billion ISK for now, trying to stay below that. Sellers though are up to just above 2 billion, buyers are down to I should say up to 1,959,000,000 ISK. And so I think that this does show that if you want a multiple pilot train certificate, have the patience to put up a buy order, just go for like 197 or something like that, and you'll definitely pick it up, because the actual average is still below 2 billion ISK. So these sellers are actually in all likeliness having a pretty hard time getting rid of their multiple pilot train certificate. If you actually need to sell right away, undercut that a little bit, go for maybe just above 2 billion or something like that if you want to liquidate pretty quickly. After that we've got the skill extractor, of course a very same picture to Plex here, second spike, so the second move to a 1-year high point, or be above 500 million ISK. Now it's just below that, 500 million ISK for the sellers, about a jump away. In Jita we will go to 515 million ISK, man. Taxes are quite impressive in this difference here between sellers and buyers of the skill extractors. And I must say, this is also something that we often notice when the market is actually hesitating a little bit. So what often happens is that Jita is a forerunner, because there's still a bit more trade happening in Jita 4.4, and so here prices are up to 515, and then the player-owned trade hubs tend to lag behind a little bit. Although what we're seeing here is that in the last 24 hours, in the last 2 hours, we see quite a bit of selling happening in this player-owned trade hub, driving the price down to less than 500 million ISK. Perhaps this time they are the ones that will drag the market behind them, which might mean that we'll see pressure on what happens in Jita. But look at this here as well. In the last 24 hours, we've got all of these sales as well, going from 518 to 514. So I'm seeing a bit of hesitation in the market to go even higher on the sellers here, and the buyers are staying down to 488 million ISK. So they are definitely trying to stay below 500 million for the extractor. Well, again, we've got, I think, that hype from the anniversary gifts, but after that I'm not sure if we can sustain these 1-year high prices for very long. Next up we have the injectors. Here are the large scale injectors continuing their ascent even on the 5-day moving average. Still a wide margin between the 5 and the 20-day moving average as well. So this uptrend doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon, and we break through the 1 billion ISK mark on the chart. That's a crazy price for a large scale injector. Again, historically here no, I shouldn't say historically, but we had this great opportunity where lots of sales in the multiple train certificates gave super margins to the skill point farmers. And so not that long ago, it is 6 months, but relatively speaking, I don't think it's that long ago. You could have bought these for 700 million ISK, and now they're selling for more than 1 billion ISK for large skill injectors. Even the buyers are now above 1 billion ISK as well. And historically speaking, this has only gone up. When these first came out and stabilized for the first time, these would have been great investments, and that I think coincided, or especially I would say when Plex were cut down from 1 Plex becoming 500 Plex, that is when I said that I think large scale injectors might become your new investments for inflation protection, with an added layer of speculation on SP demand. And here we do see that they're basically the massive winners at the moment. 1 year high point, all-time high point, 1 billion ISK for a large scale injector, and like almost 50%, right? 30 million on a 300 million on a 700 million ISK increase in price over the course of 6 months is definitely a really nice investment as well. I have to be honest here as well. I kept saying 900 million, all right, great time to sell. 950, great time to sell. I do tend to sell a little bit early when it comes to these types of things. After that, we've got the small scale injector, same pattern, even more volatility on the upswing here, heading straight for 210 million ISK. It's 212 for the sellers, 193 million for the buyers though. You can see some hesitation there in the market. They're staying below 200 million at this point. So how long can this be sustained? I personally think after the gift hype, we might start to see the change in the market. But again, that is just an expectation, that there is absolutely no certainty about that. Now we've got the daily alpha injectors, especially I also want to quickly say this now that I think about it. Well, CCP is coming up with lots of interesting Triglavian stuff, including these invasions. Who knows if they might announce some sort of expansion that'll keep drumming up hype. Then well, we might be in for an interesting time as well. So finally, the daily alpha injector went to above 80 million ISK apparently a couple of days ago, is now I think stabilizing between 70 and 80. Will we go much higher? Well, again, it's a difficult question to answer at this point. 72 million for the sellers and 68 million for the buyers. Here again, if you look at this December dip down to 40 million ISK, you get a pretty nice trade that you could have made here. Buying on these massive volume dips is buying on some CCP sales, and often tend to be really good investments, especially in the Plex stuff market. Next up, we'll move on to some minerals. As always, we'll start with titanium, 1250, let's say. Let's give us a little bit of time to get ready. As always, we'll start with titanium, and you can see that we are pretty flat above 4.5 ISK. I would consider that to be good news for people that want to do a little bit of mining. We seem to be able to support a price above 4.5 ISK at this point, but the bad news comes with this: 1.5 billion, 2 billion, 2 billion, 2 billion, 1.5 billion. This is a lot and being sold on a 14-day timer. Kind of a weird choice, but I guess it means try to get rid of that, as soon as you have an opportunity to sell above 4.5 ISK. And so there is lots of competition to sell in this market at the moment, keeping prices from actually going higher. Next up, we've got pyrite, same story, bit of a fallback on the 5-day moving average here, the blue chart, but staying above 3.8 ISK. So we can see the bottom here has been 3 ISK in December as well. 377 for the sellers, coming in with 1.8 billion ISK, is again going to keep the price from increasing in the short term. Buyers are at 368, so that's actually a decent price compared to the very bottom of this 1-year chart, right around the average. Historically speaking, of course, this is a terrible price for pyrite. After that, we get Mixalon, and here has not been able to maintain its gains. Tried to get to 65 ISK, which would put it back at an average price for the year, and actually definitely an okay price for Mixalon to be selling at. But look at that, can't maintain itself, down to less than 60 ISK again. 59.43 for the sellers, 57.61 for the buyers. And let's see if at around that 65 to 64 we can see something that has caused this, because we do see some pretty big volumes, and here you can see 50 million, 70 million, still sticking around 26 million, 44 million, then below 60, another 25 here, and 250 million units being sold for less than 60 ISK. In fact, one of the latest orders. Yeah, anytime minerals at the moment break out just a little bit from the norm and get some higher prices, you do see these volume increases crashing the prices down very quickly. There's too much stuff out there. Next up, we have Isogen, which had a very nice couple of months where it actually came down to 15 ISK and then managed to crawl its way back to 20 ISK. That was actually a couple of months where we had hopes for the minerals, but look at that again. After reaching that 19 ISK, getting closer to that 20 ISK, you can again see the volume start to really increase, and then the prices have to give way again. 1586 for the sellers, 1578 for the buyers. Very low Isogen prices again. Not a one-year low point, which we had here in early November, but definitely not a great price. After that, we have Noxium, the one mineral that had managed to hold on to that 300 ISK mark on average and did really well over the year. And despite the fact that historically speaking, this was again not a great price, at least on the 1 year mark here, this was the one mineral that managed to hold on to its range. Well, looks like finally the camel's back is broken. We went through the 300 ISK mark, and here now we have moved down towards 275. It's 283, something like that. And I personally think that we might see some continued pressure on this one. 284 for the sellers, 270 for the buyers, and the millions of units are still rolling in quite nicely. Not that many sell orders, but they're all decent in volume. I think they'll continue to put down the pressure, and I don't expect prices to go back above 300 ISK anytime soon. After that, we have Zydrine that is also continuing to slump down a little bit, broke through the 500 ISK barrier. Don't think we'll climb back above that either. 480 ISK for the sellers, 476 for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin, but the bad news, of course, if you look at the last 24 hours, you still have 4 million, 3 million, 2 million. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. We need to get back to the lowest prices. So this is still that regular, all right, we're mining our moon, bringing it to the market. That cycle keeps happening, and it is still continued pressure on these markets. Same story normally for Megasite. Yeah, in fact, a very clear continued decline towards 450 on this one. 470 for the sellers, 460 for the buyers. Sellers of Megasite have gone below the Zydrine price. Historically speaking, a completely crazy situation, but in the last 24 hours here, you can see that we have a full front page with 6 million, 2 million, 1.6 million, 2.6 million, another 1.4. So this again, and here a 3 million as the latest one. Yeah, people do tend to focus on Megasite a little bit more than Zydrine, it seems, when it comes to the moon mining opportunities, which historically speaking makes sense. At the moment, you might actually be better off with the exact opposite. And then finally, for Morphite, we have a bit of a decline as well this week, going down a bit on the chart, selling for 7,800 ISK, buyers at 7,700 ISK, still below 8,000 ISK, which is pretty low, but we have been here for like 6 months at this point. So the pressures on mineral continue to be very strong. Next up, let's move on to the PI market, 1830. Let's get in here and see what's happening. I've actually been keeping an eye on the PI market for purchase opportunities at the moment, and look at this for broadcast nodes, a continued decline. We're now playing with 1.9 million on the average prices with the chart. It's just above 1.9 million for the sellers and 1.9 million for the buyers. If you look at this chart and you're buying for exactly 1.9, it's below everything. This is another buy opportunity for an advanced PI material. What should you think about when advanced PI materials? It is structure opportunities, which, well, I have to be honest as well, at the moment, when we're seeing what's happening on CC, when we're seeing that it's all about triglavians and potentially some new PvE, but it's a massive ship, I think, that's often being described, that'll probably be like the final target of one of these invasions. Then, yeah, this is a bit of a gamble because we don't know if new structures are actually on the roadmap at the moment, or if CCP has basically changed focus to like 85% of its efforts towards the Triglavian, getting the 5th race up and running, and that structure development is a bit more on the back burner. I think that CCP has said that they're getting very close to boss parity at the moment with what we can do in the new structures, so it is a bit of a gamble. If you want to grab these cheap advanced PI materials, I would always say stick to low volumes and try to slowly purchase your way into a nice stock. Construction blocks next, try to get back to 12,000 discs, in fact succeeded so as well, back to an average price. At the tail end here we see a little bit of a drop off as well, still 12,000 for the sellers and 10,200 for the buyers. It's obviously the buyers that are lacking a little bit at the moment. These are pretty cheap, sellers are actually on average, which is an okay situation. Love to see the buyers a bit higher, but then we would probably have seen these average prices maintain itself around 12k. Consumer electronics though, moving nicely to 14,000 discs. Sellers are at 13,800 to 14,600 for most sellers. And then we have, oh, and I should maybe, well, no, look, that station that's being traded in Jita, that's it. For the buyers, they're at 13,500 disc, and I would say that this is an average to an above average price if we disregard these two first sell orders, which I think will be gone pretty quickly, and is actually a very aggressive sell price. To be honest, if I were to sell consumer electronics right now, I'd probably, and I want to be sure that I'll be able to sell them very quickly, I would honestly try to put up something like a 14,250 or something like that, rather than undercutting them by this much. So I think we can disregard them, and I would say sellers are above average, buyers are around average here. Coolants, after the nice bubble, you could say up to 15,000 disc in March, had to give back a little bit of ground, but demand seems to still be very high as we're straight back above 12,500 disc. In fact, it's back at 15,000 disc for the sellers, and the buyers are coming in at 12,400. If the average prices stay around here, it does mean that you're having a much harder time actually selling here, and that the competition is quite murdering. This is quite different from the consumer electronics, where you can see the average price at 14k, and then the seller's not that far away from that. Here, to get rid of coolants right away, I would be a bit more aggressive in my sell price, and perhaps if you want to be absolutely sure, just to say I'm pretty happy with 14k on average, let's try 13,999, and that'll be gone in absolutely no time. So it's always depending on what's happening in the market, that you should also decide on how big your undercut should be if you want to move material very quickly. Enriched uranium next, staying at around 14k, but also under pressure a little bit at the tail end, so 14,000 exactly for the first few sellers, and then we get 12,800 for the buyers. Still a great price for enriched uranium, but definitely not the peak price anymore either. Integrity response drones, advanced PI, you can see the pressure again after a bit of a speculative bubble, I think, here, where we went up to 3 million. Sellers now at 2.6 million, buyers at 2.4 million. If we try to show 2.4 million on the chart, I would still be patient here. Much better opportunities in broadcast nodes. The mechanical parts are having their second peak here as well, going back to 13,000 disc for the sellers, 12,300 for the buyers. Great time again for mechanical parts, well above average. A nice opportunity to sell at a great price. And here you can see that the margin is a bit lower than in coolants, for instance, right? For 15k and then 12,400k. When it comes to the mechanical parts here, I think you can again afford to maybe compete even with these sellers very closely, try to stay above 13,000 disc or something like that. I think that would still work because of the much smaller margin between sellers and buyers. Nuclear reactors, nice volatility. Unfortunately for me personally, it's not large enough to make a lot of trades in this good. It used to be that we would easily go sometimes from 120 to 80k. We will see much bigger swings that were tradable. Right now we're basically moving right around that 100,000 disc mark. 107 for the sellers, slight sell opportunity, well, if you did buy at the right time. But look at the buyers, they're not budging. 89,000 disc here for the buyers. That is still super low and a pretty big margin between these two. So be very careful with the nuclear reactors, because it's always one of the two sides that is having a lot of trouble actually getting the orders filled, and that's when you see these swings within a very relatively tight range, I should say. Organic mortar applicators, that was like 10 days ago, where you could have grabbed these for less than $1 million ISK. Now it's almost 1.1 million for the sellers, a bit above 1 million for the buyers, and you can see that the investments did happen here. Massive volume increase to bring the price back in line to a slightly below average price here. This is what I say is something that you should keep an eye out for, but don't go crazy with the volumes. This is of course all trades, so this is not one crazy person that decided to buy 2 to 3 times the normal volumes. It's just showing the pattern that, yeah, people notice these 1 year low points. They notice when some of these barriers like the 1 million ISK barrier get broken, and that is your opportunity to snag some cheap stuff. Robotics next, continuing to increase its range from 100,000 disc. Very good news. We definitely put that above average now. 103,000 for the sellers. Buyers are staying at 99,400. So this is a bit of a supply problem. Despite a full front page of a new robotics, it still seems like buyers are sticking to, we want to stay below 100,000 disc, but sellers are able to command a bigger premium. Self-harmonizing power cores also on the decline, breaking through 2 million. 2 million for the sellers, 1.94 million for the buyers. I'd be a little bit patient if this has any momentum. We might actually get the buyers below 1.9 million. It's not that many, and that is where I would say, try to snag some cheap self-harmonizing power cores. So keep an eye on this one. If it has any momentum, there might be a good opportunity in the upcoming week or so. The superconductors are staying at their slightly above average price, perhaps now at 12k. That's where the buyers are at, and then 12,200 for some of the sellers. So we do have this gap closing in, but we are basically right on average. Test cultures next, back on the decline. Let's see where the buyers are at. 7,300 for the sellers, but 6,766 for the buyers. That is pretty cheap, quite a bit below 7,000 disc. If you want that longer term test culture investment, this is definitely another opportunity for you to grab some on the cheap, well below 7,000 disc. And then finally we have the wetware mainframes that is continuing to play with bottom prices as well. 2.13 million on the chart. It's 2.2 million for the sellers, but 2.1 million for the buyers, which is, well, pretty damn cheap as well. So I think the PI market, the advanced PI materials are having quite a bit of trouble finding enough buyers, and here we do see some buy opportunities in my opinion if you want to speculate on another structure announcement from CCP. All the others are doing okay. The fuel-related PI materials are still well above average. Some great sell opportunities there. And then many of the others are stable on average to above average prices, which is very good news, I think. Next up, advanced moon materials. There's going to be a different picture, of course. 2750. Like that. Let's start with the carbonite. Here is the crystalline carbonite, and that is a sharp drop off to a price on average for less than 140 ISK in the last couple of days. 139 for the sellers, 133 for the buyers. This is an obvious break of the trend. This is below everything, a 1 year low point, and 133 for the buyers is quite a bit below the entire chart. This is your opportunity. I think if you want some really cheap crystalline carbonite, this is your time to strike. You have to be patient. The advanced moon material market is in a very big and prolonged slump because of the stability and the amount of safety basically that is being produced now by the big groups in nullsec. But again, I would always say don't go with massive volumes here, but a small investment here does seem to be, I think, a great thing to do. Next up, Ferrite Carbide also dropping to a 1-year low point, selling for 135 bars, or at 122 for Ferrite Carbide. That again is definitely below the entire chart. And after that, we have the titanium carbides that is trying to hold on to a slightly below average price. 184 for the sellers, 177 for the buyers. Actually, good news, I would say. Titanium carbide is still decent. It's below average, but it's not at its low point yet. And then we have tungsten carbide that's also dropping off. Try to hold on, just like with titanium carbide, for quite a bit in the 200 to 225 range, which is below average, but still doing decently well. But now look at that momentum. We're heading straight to that 175 bottom range, and we are at 180 for the sellers, 177 for the buyers. So be careful here with tungsten carbide, or keep a close eye on it. Who knows how this will evolve, but if production start to switch, if that's at all possible, from the crystalline and the ferrite carbide because of this price, and moves to these two carbides, then yeah, be careful, or watch them like a hawk and try to grab the cheapest ones, of course. Next up, we have the metamaterials. Here are the photonic metamaterials, and of course, with I think the baselines carbonites being this low, this is going to be under pressure as well. Here is photonic metamaterials, pretty damn low as well, below 16k on the chart. 16,100 for the sellers, 14,900 for the buyers. Very, very cheap as well, a 1,000 disc price margin between sellers and buyers again, and you're buying well below the entire chart here. And then for the plasmonic metamaterials, that's a bit of a surprise. You'd think that those would be under pressure a bit more as well, but they're managing to still come on 21,900 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers though, so that margin is opening up as well. Now we have the non-linear metamaterials that's holding on to 25k, not much to say there. And then the terahertz metamaterials, that's a bit under pressure at the tail end, but is still now slightly below average in its price as well. So the carbonite items, look out for those. You're, I think, buying at the baseline, the lowest possible advanced moon material, but these are of course at very clear 1-year low points here. For the other materials, we've got fermionic condensates under pressure a bit as well after reaching a price of above 100,000 disc, back down to 93,000 for the sellers and 83,000 for the buyers. I think that's actually a normal margin for this price range, and so we are not too low just yet, but we're obviously back below average. Ferrogel, same thing, look at that pressure. In fact, how close to 40k are the buyers? It's 44,000 for the sellers and 42,200 for the buyers. 42,200, look at that, below the entire chart yet again. So Ferrogel, that has quite a bit of momentum on this downtrend and is playing with 1-year lows as well. Fullerites continuing a slow decline and now also breaking the low points of the year. Seems to be a trend here in the advanced moon materials. 879 for the sellers, 766 for the buyers. Here, because of the lack of momentum, this slow downtrend, I think it's going to be even harder to actually grab the cheapest stuff, because you don't know how long this is going to continue. I do think you can see that the volumes do increase, so some people are already making their moves, but compare this to that dive down in crystalline carbonites, you do have a clearer picture here that some dumping happened that has crashed the price, and that there's, I think, a better chance that this won't last. Whereas Fullerites, well, that seems to be a straight 1-month slide with no end in sight. Hypersynaptic fibers also breaking down, 11,000 disc, yep, 10,900 for the sellers, 11,100 for the buyers. Very cheap as well if we look at this entire chart. So basically, after the minerals, it's now time for the advanced moon materials to get crushed, a lot of them for 1 year straight, as well production just increases on a stable nullsec and a more and more available moon mining activity. Nanotransmitters, bit under pressure as well, not yet at the dip that we've seen in October, but definitely not holding on to 5,000 disc, 4,900 for the sellers, 4,700 for the buyers. Not too much of a margin, so here there is some resistance to go even lower, but who knows how long that will last. Phenolic composites, did that slow 1 month plus slide down to 1650, and then now a bit of a comeback to 2k, but the pressure is still on. Less than 1900 for the sellers, 1810 for the buyers. And finally we have the ceramic fibers, that's also breaking down, less than 400 ISK, playing with that 1 year low point as well. 390 for the sellers and 367 for the buyers, pretty damn cheap as well. So it's definitely up to you to decide how much you want to invest in this, but I would personally say that we are at a lot of 1 year low points all of a sudden here in advanced move materials, and some of them quite swiftly. So in just a couple of days, it's pretty obvious that something broke down there. Next up, the Tick 2 market. Are we gonna see some cheap Tick 2 ships as well then? Well, let's see, 34, 35. Like that, and let's go over these. Here is the Aries, managed to climb its way back to above 30 million ISK, and well, it doesn't last on these lower production prices, of course. 27.6 million for the sellers, 26.4 still for the buyers. Get rid of a couple more of those, and we're in the 25 million ranges. I think that is potentially pretty interesting if you look at this average chart. The Basilisk also, right, coming under pressure again, going back down to less than 230, 220 for the sellers, 208 for the buyers. Definitely, I mean, really cheap, quite below average. A great opportunity to grab some Tick 2 ships, especially when you're flying them themselves. Now, from time to time, something else will happen. Of course, here is the Cerberus that went down to 220 on the average price. I think buyers went well below 200 million at this point, and so you do have some investors, of course, that decide to take advantage of that, driving the price back up a little bit. 270 now for the sellers of the Cerberus, 255 for the buyers. That is back to a below average price. I think you could say that 275 to 300 million is the normal average here, so this is definitely a low area, but here right now, of course, we're actually at a slight increase in price due to the buy opportunity that showed up. The Crow went back above 30 million ISK, has in fact been able to command a price above 30 million ISK for quite a bit in the last year, but now look at the tail end here, down to 27.5, 28 million for the sellers, 27.5 for the first buyer. So here the pressure is on. The Guardian, same thing, not managing to get back above 230. Here we had some nice volatility, and at the right times you could buy very close to 200 million ISK and then sell for 250, sell for 280. Nice little trade that potentially could be made, but the volatility has been snuffed out at this point. 224 for the sellers, 210 for the buyers, and I don't think, unless something big happens in Nulsik, that this will change anytime soon. The Heretic tried to get back from a bottom of 60 million to 80 million, or actually did so, but here at the tail end again in the last 10 days or so, pressure is back. 74 million for the sellers, 68 million for the buyers. Then we've got the Hound, also obviously back below 30 million ISK, bit of pressure at the tail end here as well. Sellers are at 27, buyers are at 26. I'd rather see 25 and below to be sure of a return on the purchase, but it isn't there just yet. Then we've got the Ishtar, that was pretty low last week as well. Continued slow pressure here, so yet another 1 year low point for the Ishtar. 215 for the sellers, 202 for the buyers. Really cheap at the moment, so if you want an Ishtar, I think it's an incredible ship, definitely something for Explorer to consider. I think they can do any types of pirates, any types of high-sec combat content, and I think that it's basically the one ship where you can very reliably combine that with a relic or a combined analyzer to really do all the content that you can find in high-sec. This all-in-one option for the Ishtar to me is a crazy fun way of exploring, and right now 200 million ISK, 1 year low points, really cheap to grab that ship. An incredible ship, by the way, so if you ever plan to use one, this is definitely the time to grab it from the market. Then we've got the Manticore, continued pressure as well, going back to less than 30 million ISK. Where are the buyers? 25.1. Yeah, that is definitely so much below the chart that I think I have to make a move on this one. 30 million for the sellers, 25.1 million for the buyers. If you try to get that on the chart, that is so much below everything. That is kind of crazy. I don't think it's gonna last for very long, but this is definitely one where you gotta risk a buy order. 26 million, stay in the 25 to 26 million range, and look at the average price here, 35, 40 million, well above 30 million most of the year. This is crazy situation for the Manticore, and that's where I also would put my my radar on. 25 million for a Manticore is actually really low. Then we've got the Munin, continued pressure here as well. Currently selling for 220 to 225 for most of them, then 200 million for the buyers. A bit like the Ishtar, very cheap at the moment. Then we get the Nemesis back under pressure as well. Buyers are down to 23.2 million, sellers at 26 million. This again is well below 25 million. You can see the spikes for the Nemesis are not as good, and the sustained price is not as good as the Manticore, but 35 million, 30 million and above is definitely possible, and you're now buying them for around 23 million. So that's definitely an opportunity as well. The Oneros, well, I don't really like the Oneros too much, but we do want to take a look at all the logistics, and sometimes you have exceptional lows that do potentially create an opportunity, but here, I really personally think that the volumes are a problem. 209 million for the sellers, 198, you're buying them below 200 million ISK, which is probably okay if we ever spike up, but it feels a bit too risky to me to really go for this one. Then we get the Purifier, and this is what we do like. Of course, volatility up to 40 million is 3 times in the last 6 to 7 months here, with bottoms then going towards that 25 million mark. So here we come from 40 million, we're back down to 30. Sellers are at 31 million, buyers are already down to 27.5 million. Again, a bit more patience and try to get closer to that 25 million mark, or closer to that 26 million as the yearly bottom here. And that's where I do think you can grab some cheap purifiers. If this has more momentum in the next week or so, that would be awesome. Then we get the Saber, same story as the other interdictor here, went to a low point of 65 million, is slowly tried to make its way back to a more average price, but here at the tail end, pressure is unstoppable. 67 million for the sellers, back to 64 million for the buyers. Then we get the Scimitar, that one is actually up a little bit on increased volumes, but coming from a 1-year low point of less than 200 million about 1.5 months ago. There is some active trading happening here, to 18 million for the sellers, 202 for the buyers, still pretty cheap. And then we get the Stiletto finally, that is now also falling off a cliff apparently. 27.5 million most of the time, now selling for 26 million, buyers are down to 22.3 million. This is another drop off where the buyers are so much below the entire chart that well, I don't think you're gonna grab 100 Stilettos at those crazy buy prices, but if you try to grab 1 or 2, I do think you can make a good deal there. So the Take-Two market, I think following suit on the advanced move material market, we do see some low demand here and there, which create, I think, opportunities. After that, we have the Tech-3 markets coming in at 42.10. Like that, and you may already have seen on the ticker that the Tengu had a pretty sharp drop off, so let's see if we see more of that. Here is the Confessor holding on to 40 million quite comfortably, 40.4 million for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers, and volumes, well, last 24 hours, look at that full front page, 1314, 1 of 44 here, but nothing all too crazy for a 40 million plus sell price. It is a bit more. The availability is slowly going up though, that is definitely noticeable here. After that, we have the Hecate that went to 42.5 million, so a bit more expensive. Then the Confessor at 43 million for the sellers, 39.5 for the buyers. Here, last 24 hours, half a front page, 27.20, so a little bit less of that. Yeah, be a bit careful here with the Confessor volumes. The Hecate volumes look to me to be right on the ball. This is the right availability, the right amounts to be able to support this price of more than 40 million ISK. After that, we have the Jackdaw that's actually breaking down a little bit, having to give ground back below 40 million ISK, 38.3 for the sellers, 36.9 for the buyers, and we do see here 92, 53, 41 on the latest one, 48 here, bit of increased volumes, and that's a little bit careful. Of course, the Jackdaw does come from 50 million ISK, and so perhaps there is some basically some extra volumes that have been produced that are now finding their way to the market. But here we obviously have a cheaper Jackdaw. Margin is not that high that I would say that the buyers have decided that they want some really cheap Jackdaws where you could actually start trading on these. But the pressure is obvious due to increased volumes, and well, the Confessor definitely a bit above average in volumes as well. Let's keep that in mind. And then finally we get this Vapel that's actually trying to get back to that 40 million range. We get 40 million for the sellers, 36.6 for the buyers, and you can see here that we get 1 of 57, but that's about it for the big volume, so this is far more reasonable. So interesting in the destroyer market, two of them, the Hecate and this Vapel, don't have anything too crazy, feel like they're pretty healthy. Jackdaw and Confessor, a bit more increased volumes here all of a sudden that are driving the price back down, something that we should keep an eye on. After that we get the cruisers. Here is the Legion going back down to 160 million ISK, 163 for the sellers and 151 for the buyers. But the volumes here, we got 17, we get 12 and 21. Last 24 hours it is a full front page, but the availability doesn't feel that crazy, so this to me is actually okay. Then we get the Loki continuing a slow downtrend here as well. Sellers are at 165, buyers are at 158. 158. Let's see if we can get something close to that on the chart. Here is 160. That is pretty damn cheap, gotta say. We do have 49, 49, 39 here. Last 24 hours full front page. Look at the margin here, quite a bit bigger as well. So you're buying these below 160. I would say this Loki right now a bit too much on the markets. Buyers below 160. Perhaps this is a buy opportunity, but that is really the question that you have to ask yourself, right? In the Tengu here, we do see quite a bit of volatility on the downtrend, and I think that we'll see that there. But you gotta be careful about your expectations of these increased volumes. Here is the Proteus, also some pressure in the last month or so. 162 million for the sellers, 153 for the buyers, and here then volumes again, a little bit like the no, it was the Hecate and the Vapel. Nothing crazy. This is normal. It's quite a bit in the last 24 hours, but the availability is not crazy high. And then we have the Tengu. That's a bit different, right? Definitely a bit of a sharper drop off at the end with 150 as the mark. 154 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. Pretty cheap as well. And then in the last 24 hours we have like two front pages with here 35, another 25, 27, 26. That's definitely a lot more than the others. That's coming more, I think, in the Loki region, where we do have quite a bit being sold here all of a sudden as well. So here, basically the same 2-2 pattern. We've got two cruisers that feel like they have the normal lower volumes and regular availability, but we see the Loki and the Tengu with lots of production, increased volumes and prices that are going to a pretty damn low point. And basically here for the tech tree market, it's a decision to make. This Tengu chart looks very interesting to try to make a move on some Tengus close to 142 million. That's pretty damn cheap, and that's potentially a really nice money maker. On the other hand, this is happening in ships where supply all of a sudden is more than the market can handle, and if that sustains itself, it might start to put pressure across the tech tree market board, and that is when patience would be the right move. So interesting situation in the tech tree market, definitely one with opportunities but also with potential pitfalls. And then for the extra product this week, I'm gonna take another look at the faction frigates. It's been a while. It's gonna be at 47.50. Let's see what we can spot here. So we got ships and we get frigates, and we have the faction frigates. So we'll start with the pirate factions and see what they are doing. The Astero, after in March reaching a 1-year low point of around 50 million, managed to make its way back towards 60 million ISK, and now at the tail end here we see a bit more pressure again. 56 million for the sellers, that's actually quite reasonable. 52 million for the buyers, that's on the cheaper side, but nothing too crazy. So Astero a bit below average after reaching a 1-year low point about 2 months ago. Then we get the cruiser that is continuing to trade well below average at the moment. So this is a sustained low price point for the cruiser for quite a bit. 43.5 million for the sellers, 39 million for the buyers. I'm suspecting that this is basically against stability in nullsec that is creating this pattern right here. So if you want to fly a cruiser, well, it's pretty cheap right now to grab it. If you want to trade in it, that does feel risky without some nullsec shakeup. Then we get the Daredevil. Man, need to do a bit of work to get some volatility to show up here, but this is definitely at the low end as well, I would say. 62 million for the sellers, 57 million for the buyers. The Daredevil below 60 million. Let's see if we can get that to show something close to that. Is pretty cheap as well. The Dramiel is holding on to 45 million. That's also pretty cheap actually. 42 million in fact for the buyers. Not a low point just yet, but also well below average, I would say. Then we get the Garmer. That's actually up in price a little bit. Interesting in the last 1.5 months or so, going from 50 million and now selling for 57 million. So it looks more volatile on the chart than it actually is, with above 10% in increased price. 52 million for the buyers. It's basically above average, but not a massive spike or anything like that either. The Succubus is holding on to 60 million ISKs, 59 for the sellers, 58 for the buyers. No margin, average price here. Very interesting looking ship, I think. And then we get the Worm that went to a low point again as well in March to 50 million ISK. Is now above that a little bit, 55 to 58 for the sellers, 51 million for the buyers. So still pretty cheap. Worm, very interesting ship if you want to do the co-op Abyss with 3 frigates. This is like your Gila version of the frigates there, and definitely lots of potential. So pretty cheap for you to grab at the moment as well. Interesting potential. Pirate faction frigates, on average, pretty cheap right now. Now let's take a look at the Navy factions. Here is the Caldari Navy hookbill, and this should mean some faction warfare movement. We can see that in March we had a high point of 20 million ISK, and now we are down to 10 million ISK. So that should mean that loyalty points from Caldari faction warfare went from being super expensive, so you don't make a lot of them. Caldari is losing out in faction warfare too. Well, we're back on the cheap end, and Caldari ought to be winning. 12 million for the sellers, 10 million for the buyers. Look at that volatility. It's on the downtrend, so this would mean that if you want in on a trade like that, this is your time to grab cheap Caldari Navy hookbills and wait for them to lose out again, where you can sell, well, potentially double the price. Not bad. Then we get Federation Navy Comet. We should see the exact Comet. Well, all right. So Federation Navy Comet, god damn it, that's 3 times and I make the same mistake. Comet starts at 10 million ISK, and here we, of course, we have the exact same opposite, super cheap Galente LP. So we get the cheap Comets, and now that goes up in price. So here in March, if you had bought these for 10 million, you're now selling them for 17 million, is 70% profit. Not bad. This is something that every time I check it and we see these movements, it's so awesome, because this is actually predictable. This is something where you could go into faction warfare, see what's happening, know exactly when you should be buying and we should be selling. This is a great opportunity for active trading, but it's something where I just don't have the time to follow it actively enough, and I should maybe try to somehow find a way to do that. I keep saying it, I keep putting it off. But just look at this, a 70% trade that was really very predictable. And look at this opportunity here, this movement, which is something that we don't see in most of the other economy, because there, of course, production is generally overinflated for the destruction in the game. Then we have an Amar one, Imperial Navy Slicer, staying at 20 million, definitely at the high end. 19.5 for the sellers, 18 million for the buyers. And are we seeing some cheap Minmatar ones then? Yeah, these are down to 10 million ISK at the moment. 10.5 for the sellers, 8.4 for the buyers. Well, here we get this has been going on for a couple of months, and it obviously means that the Minmatar LP is very cheap at the moment. You're buying these fire deals for less than 9 million ISK. But look at the potential. If we could ever go up to 18, 20 million ISK, which is what the Amar are at the moment. What an incredible trade to make. So if you're looking for that investment right now, then yeah, Minmatar seems to be super cheap. The Crucifier is up to, good God, 25 million ISK. 27 in fact, just on the lack of availability. Again, the LP is not flowing. It's super expensive at the moment. What a sell opportunity if you have some of that LP lying around, or Crucifier Navy issues that you could have bought for a cheap price, let's say 10 million about a year ago. That is a 250% profit. Just like that. Good God. That is so interesting. This is crazy. Then we got the Griffin Navy issue. A bit less good because of the terrible volumes here, but you can clearly see the downtrend on the 20-day moving average going from 17.5 million down to 10 million for the buyers. Now 16.5, so this one is moving a bit more difficultly. If you want a short trade, obviously go for the Caldari Navy hook bill, but the trend is visible here as well. Then we get the Molus Navy issue that's actually going up in price. So we have here 10 million, 11 million on the low points currently. Well, the lack of availability, again, selling for 20 million is right now on the Molus Navy issue. Volumes though, we gotta keep an eye on that as well. Look at the volume increase here. So obviously they're coming to the market, and the volume decrease here as well. It's not easy to trade in this market, but it is something where regular trades and where you actually have in-game information that you can follow, that'll give you a nice heads up as well. And then finally we get the Vigil fleet issue that is obviously at the low point as well. 12.5 million, 30 million for the sellers, 10.5 for the buyers. If you want in on, or if you want to get started on that trade, on these trades, then obviously Caldari Navy hook bill is kind of crazy right now. I would say move on that and move on the Minmatar ships that are crazy low as well. And then wait for the or start fighting for the Amar. So they're winning out. Yeah, I always have to think about exactly how it works. So they're very cheap, so Minmatar is winning out. So yeah, buy Minmatar, start fighting for DMR to get their prices to go back up. That is basically what you could do here. Super interesting stuff in my opinion. I wish I had even more time to cover it regularly and to maybe even take part in that put an alpha clone in faction warfare. Try to have some fun that way, but it's really a time thing for me at the moment. Anyways, that's it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.